We do know that Camilla had told friends at this point that she was surprised at the unexpected side to William that she had found. "The boy's got a temper," she apparently said.
Inheritance changed everything behind the palace the moment Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral Castle. A constitutional transition unfolded before the public had fully absorbed the news, while attention naturally centered on King Charles III ascending the throne. Another important change happened automatically and without ceremony. Prince William instantly became Duke of Cornwall, inheriting responsibility for the Duchy of Cornwall, one of Britain's oldest and most valuable private estates. Unlike the Crown Estate, which belongs to the monarchy as an institution, the duchy is private property held by the reigning monarch's eldest son and heir. That distinction gave William genuine authority over its management from his very first day in the role. Suddenly, decisions that had once belonged to his father became his alone to make, placing him in control of an estate with centuries of history and enormous financial significance. Palace observers quickly noticed that William approached the responsibility with unusual focus rather than celebration. Instead of treating the inheritance as a symbolic milestone, he reportedly began examining how the vast estate operated behind the scenes. Covering thousands of acres across England and Wales, the duchy includes farms, residential properties, historic buildings, commercial interests, renewable energy projects, and long-term investments established across centuries. It also provides financial independence for the heir to the throne, allowing future monarchs to carry out official duties without depending entirely on public funding. That independence has always been one of the estate's defining purposes, and now it rested firmly in William's hands, giving him both authority and responsibility from the very beginning. As internal reviews quietly began, attention shifted from the size of the inheritance to the direction it might take under new leadership. Those familiar with palace operations reportedly noticed administrative activity moving faster than expected, fueling questions about whether William intended to leave his own mark immediately. No dramatic public announcement accompanied these early developments, yet the absence of headlines only encouraged greater curiosity. Instead of making sweeping public declarations, the changes appeared to unfold quietly through routine reviews and management decisions. Some interpreted the process as nothing more than the normal responsibilities expected after any leadership transition. Others wondered whether it reflected a broader effort to modernize long-standing arrangements that had remained largely unchanged for years, without detailed public explanations. Every reported adjustment attracted growing speculation. Supporters viewed William's approach as evidence of careful management, accountability, and a willingness to ensure the estate remained fit for the future. Critics questioned whether deeper personal tensions inside the royal family could eventually influence decisions connected to such an important institution. Because the duchy occupies a unique position between royal tradition and private management, even ordinary administrative choices carried unusual symbolic weight. At that stage, there was little concrete evidence supporting either interpretation, leaving observers to debate what these quiet moves truly represented. One reality, however, was impossible to ignore. William now possessed independent authority over an estate carrying centuries of history, immense financial significance, and considerable symbolic power. As his first decisions slowly emerged, it became increasingly clear that this inheritance represented far more than property. For many royal watchers, the duchy was becoming the first real window into William's leadership style, raising broader questions about how he might eventually shape the monarchy itself when his time to reign finally arrives. Old arrangements were quietly unraveling, but the deepest consequences had barely surfaced. Which forgotten decisions were about to trigger an even greater royal dispute? Who would challenge William's authority behind closed doors, and what unexpected revelation was waiting to reshape everything? Stay tuned. Quiet reforms spark royal unease. Prince William's first days overseeing the Duchy of Cornwall quickly evolved from a routine transfer of responsibility into a closely watched period of quiet change. Although no dramatic announcements accompanied his arrival, subtle developments inside the estate suggested that its new leader intended to examine long-standing arrangements with fresh eyes. Behind the historic buildings, farmland, and financial investments lay decades of established practices that had continued largely without public attention. Now, those practices were facing careful review under William's authority. The duchy had always been more than a collection of valuable properties. It existed to provide financial independence for the heir to the throne, allowing each future monarch to manage significant resources while preparing for greater responsibilities. Because of that purpose, every appointment, contract, and business decision carried both financial and symbolic importance. William inherited not only the estate itself, but also the responsibility to ensure it reflected the standards he believed should guide its future. Reports soon indicated that existing contracts and long-serving professional relationships were being reviewed as part of a wider assessment of how the estate operated. Such reviews are not unusual during leadership transitions, yet the timing and pace attracted unusual interest. Instead of assuming every arrangement would automatically continue, William reportedly encouraged a closer examination of established practices. For some observers, this reflected modern management. For others, it hinted at something more significant. Attention quickly turned toward individuals whose roles had existed for many years. Among the names drawing public interest was Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's sister, who had worked with the duchy on interior design projects over an extended period. Her connection to the estate became part of the growing conversation because it represented one of the most visible examples of a long-standing professional relationship linked to the previous era of management. As discussions surrounding staffing and contracts intensified, media outlets began asking whether the estate was entering a completely different phase under William's leadership. Supporters argued that reviewing appointments demonstrated accountability and reflected the expectations placed on someone preparing for an even greater constitutional role. Critics, however, questioned whether personal history inside the royal family could ever be completely separated from administrative decisions. Without official explanations detailing every review, speculation naturally filled the gaps. Some believed the changes represented simple modernization, while others suspected they carried a deeper symbolic message about influence, priorities, and the future direction of the monarchy. Whatever the motivation, one conclusion became increasingly difficult to dismiss. William appeared determined to establish his own approach rather than simply preserve inherited systems. That growing impression transformed routine estate management into the first major controversy surrounding his leadership, leaving many wondering which long-standing traditions might face scrutiny next. Everything suddenly looks far bigger than anyone imagined. Why are longtime insiders growing increasingly uneasy? What hidden obstacle threatens William's sweeping transformation? And who stands to lose the most when the next decisive move quietly changes everything before another unexpected revelation turns the palace upside down? Stay glued. Transformation reaches every corner quietly. What first appeared to be a limited review of staffing soon revealed itself as something much broader. As Prince William settled into his role as Duke of Cornwall, it became increasingly clear that his attention extended beyond individual appointments. The focus was shifting toward the overall structure of the duchy itself. Rather than preserving every existing practice simply because it had existed for years, he appeared determined to examine how the estate operated from the ground up. That realization surprised many inside royal circles, where gradual change has traditionally been favored over rapid reform. The Duchy of Cornwall had always balanced history with practical responsibility. Its vast network of farms, businesses, residential properties, forests, and commercial investments required careful management across multiple regions. William inherited not only valuable assets, but also the challenge of preparing the estate for future generations. Reports suggested that this meant looking closely at financial planning, long-term sustainability, and operational efficiency. Instead of focusing only on preserving tradition, attention increasingly turned toward ensuring the estate remained resilient in a changing economic and environmental landscape. Observers also noted that environmental priorities appeared to receive greater emphasis under the new leadership. Sustainable farming, conservation efforts, and responsible land management had already been discussed within the duchy before William assumed control. But many believed those goals were becoming more central to its future direction. At the same time, independent professional advisors reportedly played a larger role in evaluating projects and recommending decisions. This approach suggested that expertise and accountability were becoming increasingly important alongside established royal customs. Another noticeable shift involved the philosophy surrounding appointments and recruitment. Rather than relying primarily on long-standing personal relationships, greater attention appeared to be placed on professional qualifications and the specific needs of the estate. While no official statement described this as a complete break from previous practice, the pattern encouraged widespread discussion. Some interpreted it as evidence that William wanted every position to reflect modern governance standards. Others questioned whether those changes would inevitably affect individuals who had enjoyed close connections during earlier administrations. As these adjustments gradually unfolded, quiet resistance reportedly began to emerge. Not everyone welcomed a period of review that challenged familiar routines and established expectations. For some, the reforms represented necessary modernization. For others, they raised concerns about losing influence that had existed for many years. Because many of the discussions remained private, speculation continued to grow alongside the limited information available. By this stage, the conversation had moved far beyond a single staffing decision. Increasingly, the evidence pointed toward a comprehensive transformation of one of Britain's most significant private estates, suggesting that William's leadership style could ultimately shape far more than the future of the duchy alone. As family lines quietly harden, deeper questions begin surfacing. Are these differences merely private disagreements or signs of a lasting royal transformation? Who truly influences the monarchy's future behind closed doors? Could one unexpected decision reshape everything the public believes about royal unity? Keep watching. Changing priorities divide royal perspectives. As Prince William's reforms gathered momentum, the conversation inside royal circles began to change. What had started as routine estate management was now being viewed through a much wider lens. Every adjustment within the Duchy of Cornwall seemed to prompt a larger question about the future direction of the monarchy itself. The discussion was no longer focused solely on contracts or appointments. Instead, it centered on whether a new generation of royal leadership was beginning to replace long-established traditions with a different vision for the years ahead. The contrast between William's approach and earlier methods became increasingly noticeable. The Duchy of Cornwall is a private estate managed by the Duke of Cornwall, separate from the royal household that supports the monarch's official duties. Even so, changes within such an important estate inevitably attracted attention across the wider royal institution. Because of William's position as heir to the throne, many observers viewed his decisions as an early indication of how he might eventually lead as king. That perception gave even ordinary administrative actions far greater significance. Supporters believed William was emphasizing transparency, careful financial oversight, and professional accountability. They argued that every large organization, regardless of history, benefits from regular review and updated management practices. To them, his willingness to reassess inherited systems demonstrated preparation rather than disruption. Others, however, viewed the developments differently. Some questioned whether modern efficiency could unintentionally weaken traditions that had helped define the monarchy for generations. Without detailed public explanations for every decision, competing interpretations continued to grow. The reported impact on individuals connected to Queen Camilla's extended family added another layer of attention. Although the duchy operates independently from the royal household, public discussion often blurred that distinction. As a result, routine estate decisions were increasingly interpreted as reflections of wider family relationships. Newspapers, commentators, and royal watchers began comparing William's leadership style with that of King Charles III. searching for clues about possible differences in priorities. Every new report encouraged fresh debate, even when confirmed information remained limited. At the same time, public perception gradually shifted. Rather than seeing William simply as the future king, many people began viewing him as a leader, already shaping one of the monarchy's most influential institutions. His actions suggested a preference for measured change instead of preserving every inherited arrangement without review. Whether those choices represented practical management or the beginning of a broader transformation remained open to interpretation. One conclusion nevertheless became harder to dismiss. The estate had evolved into more than a financial responsibility. It was becoming a visible example of William's leadership philosophy, raising important questions about how tradition and modernization might coexist as the monarchy prepared for its next chapter together. What began as a simple estate review now points towards something far more calculated. Is William quietly preparing for a monarchy few expected? Who already understands the hidden blueprint? And what shocking revelation could redefine everything believed about his long-term strategy? Let's find out. Strategy beyond today's estate decisions. As the reviews inside the Duchy of Cornwall continued, a different picture gradually began to emerge. What initially appeared to be a series of isolated management decisions increasingly looked like part of a broader strategy. Rather than reacting to individual situations, Prince William seemed focused on building a framework that could guide the estate for decades. That possibility transformed the discussion surrounding his leadership. Observers were no longer asking only why certain changes had been made. They were beginning to ask what larger goal those decisions were designed to achieve. The duchy has always served a purpose beyond generating income. Since its creation in 1337, it has existed to provide financial independence for the heir to the throne, allowing future monarchs to prepare for their responsibilities before ascending the crown. Because of that unique role, every reform inside the estate carries significance beyond its immediate financial impact. Decisions made today could influence how the institution operates long into the future, making careful planning an essential part of its management. Reports surrounding William's leadership suggested an increasing emphasis on modern governance standards. Greater attention appeared to be placed on transparency, professional oversight, and clearly defined responsibilities. Instead of relying primarily on inherited customs, the estate seemed to be moving toward systems designed to improve accountability and long-term stability. Such measures are common within large organizations, yet their introduction inside one of Britain's oldest royal institutions attracted considerable interest because they reflected a different style of leadership. Some palace observers reportedly noticed a consistent pattern developing across multiple decisions. Staffing reviews, contract evaluations, financial planning, and environmental priorities all appeared connected by the same underlying objective. Rather than representing unrelated adjustments, they seemed to support a long-term vision focused on strengthening the duchy before William eventually inherits even greater constitutional responsibilities. Whether intentional or not, that impression encouraged growing discussion among royal commentators. Supporters argued that these developments demonstrated careful preparation for the future. In their view, William was using the experience gained through managing the duchy to refine the leadership skills required of a future king. Others remained more cautious, suggesting that outside observers could easily interpret ordinary administrative reforms as evidence of a much larger agenda. Without detailed public explanations, neither interpretation could be fully confirmed, allowing speculation to continue alongside the available facts. Even so, one conclusion steadily gained momentum. The estate no longer appeared to be functioning solely as inherited property passed from one generation to the next. Increasingly, it resembled a practical testing ground where leadership, methods, governance principles, and long-term priorities could be developed before facing the far greater responsibilities awaiting the future monarch. That possibility quietly raised the stakes of every decision still to come. As familiar influence quietly disappears, unexpected tensions begin surfacing behind closed doors. Who still holds real power inside the estate? which quiet decision changes everything? And could one final development leave even the most trusted royal insiders questioning what comes next? Stay with us. Power shifts behind palace doors. As Prince William's changes became more firmly established within the Duchy of Cornwall, their impact extended beyond policies and paperwork. Gradually, attention turned toward something less visible, but equally important. The balance of influence inside the estate appeared to be changing. Long-standing personal connections that had once been viewed as part of the institution's culture seemed to matter less as professional standards increasingly guided important decisions. Although many of these developments happened quietly, they did not go unnoticed by those following the future king's leadership. For many years, the duchy had operated under different generations of management, each bringing its own priorities and trusted advisors. Such continuity is common within historic institutions, where experience and established relationships often provide stability. However, leadership transitions also create opportunities to reassess how organizations function. William's approach appeared to reflect that principle. Rather than allowing inherited arrangements to continue automatically, reports suggested greater emphasis was being placed on qualifications, accountability, and the long-term interests of the estate itself. As those priorities became clearer, some observers believed that informal influence was gradually losing its importance. Individuals once regarded as closely connected to previous leadership no longer seemed guaranteed the same level of involvement. This changing atmosphere naturally attracted attention because public discussion had already focused on members of Queen Camilla's wider circle, whose professional relationships with the estate were reportedly affected during the review process. While there was no official suggestion of personal conflict driving every decision, the timing encouraged continued speculation about what the broader changes truly represented. Inside royal circles, opinions reportedly remained divided. Supporters argued that every major institution must evolve if it hopes to remain effective in a changing world. They viewed William's emphasis on professional management as a logical step toward strengthening the duchy for future generations. Others questioned whether reducing the influence of long-established relationships might unintentionally weaken traditions that had developed over many years. Because much of the estate's internal decision-making remained private, these competing interpretations continued without definitive answers. Royal commentators also began examining the wider significance of the reforms. Some suggested that William's management style reflected a broader commitment to efficiency, transparency, and responsible stewardship. Others urged caution, reminding audiences that leadership transitions often generate speculation before their full impact becomes clear. Without detailed public explanations accompanying every decision, both viewpoints continued to shape the conversation. Whatever interpretation ultimately proves most accurate, one conclusion appeared increasingly difficult to ignore. The culture surrounding the duchy was evolving alongside its leadership. Personal influence seemed to be giving way to structured governance, and that quiet transformation carried implications reaching well beyond the estate itself. As expectations shifted, many wondered whether this changing approach would eventually redefine other parts of the monarchy in equally significant ways. Everything now points beyond one estate toward the monarchy's future. Has William quietly revealed the blueprint for an entirely different royal era? How much further will his reforms reach? Which centuries-old traditions could be transformed before anyone fully realizes what is happening? Legacy begins before crown arrives. By the time Prince William's reforms had settled into the daily operation of the Duchy of Cornwall, the conversation had expanded far beyond the estate itself. What once seemed like a routine transfer of responsibility was increasingly viewed as an early glimpse into the leadership style of Britain's future king. Every review, every management decision, and every adjustment encouraged fresh debate about whether these quiet changes represented the beginning of something much larger. The duchy was no longer being discussed simply as inherited property. It had become a symbol of how William intended to exercise responsibility when entrusted with significant authority. That perception carried considerable weight because the duchy has always served as more than a financial asset. For centuries, it has prepared the heir to the throne by providing practical experience in overseeing land, businesses, communities, and long-term investments. The lessons learned while managing the estate naturally shape the judgment and priorities of the person expected to one day lead the monarchy. For that reason, many observers believed William's approach offered valuable insight into his broader philosophy of leadership. As the estate continued evolving, reports suggested that professional standards and structured governance had become central priorities. Those developments reinforced the impression that inherited customs would be respected but not automatically preserved without review. Such an approach inevitably altered expectations for everyone connected with the duchy. Individuals and families whose influence had developed under previous administrations appeared to face a different environment, one where established relationships carried less weight than clearly defined responsibilities. Among those attracting public attention were members of Queen Camilla's wider family, whose changing connection to the estate became part of the wider discussion surrounding William's reforms. Public reaction remained divided throughout the process. Some praised the emphasis on accountability, describing it as evidence of careful preparation for future responsibilities. Others questioned whether modernization could gradually reshape traditions that had defined the monarchy for generations. Neither perspective fully settled the debate because many internal decisions remained private, leaving room for continued interpretation and careful scrutiny from royal commentators. Yet one point became increasingly difficult to dismiss. The Duchy of Cornwall had quietly become a testing ground where leadership could be demonstrated before the crown eventually changed hands. Every measured decision added another piece to a growing picture of William's priorities, suggesting that stability and reform did not necessarily have to exist in opposition. The larger question, therefore, remained unanswered. If these carefully managed changes reflected the principles William hopes to carry into the future, then the transformation unfolding inside one historic estate today may eventually influence the direction of the monarchy itself for generations still to come. So, what do you think? Is William modernizing the monarchy or unnecessarily distancing Camilla's family from royal influence? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more royal stories.